we interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
The term cultural democracy, in the most general sense, means democratic access for everyone to all forms of culture in a society. The dominant approach since the Arts Council was established has been to widen access to and participation with major cultural works. The consumer plays a rather passive role in this approach, often referred to as the democratizing culture or deficit model, where the aim is to take great art to the people. Here, the focus lies on the art itself, its creation and aesthetic relation, which is disseminated to an audience. The model has been widely criticized for seeking to create a universal canon, where a cultural authority decides what is to be considered art, and that some forms of culture are superior to others, forcing the taste of one small group of people upon the whole of society. In this, it disregards the many ways in which people are already taking part in cultural activities, which are not related to publicly funded organizations or the professional arts. As a reaction to this, the model of cultural democracy emerged, which rejects hierarchies of cultural value and instead promotes cultural capabilities for everyone. It recognizes and supports the diversity of everyday creativity, participation, and cultural activities, and understands culture as an ecology wherein all forms of art are interrelated. Cultural democracy is achieved when everyone has the power, whether or not they choose to exercise it, to pursue and realize cultural creativity, thereby co-creating versions of culture. Pilvi Takala plays with a mix of expectation and surprise in her works. Invisible Friend was a free text messaging service for anyone who wanted to have an anonymous, personal conversation with someone who would always reply. The artwork created a unique and personal relationship with anyone wishing to engage with it. The service ran between November 2015 and January 2016, with a team of 7 people reading and replying to text messages from 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. During the 2 months of Invisible Friend, more than 1,000 users exchanged some 18,000 messages. The conversations were directed by the people texting the number, and the improvised replies were in response to the user's input. The idea for Invisible Friend came from Takala's experience of working for a text messaging service in the United States, where the users paid to have a fake girlfriend or boyfriend texting them. Takala was fascinated by the potential of the fictional space created through the text messages. However, she and her co-workers also expressed their frustration over the lack of quality and inconsistency in the messages. This led them to discuss the qualities of the best possible invisible partner. Their text message conversation was presented in the same space where the number for Invisible Friend was displayed. All conversations with the Invisible Friend remained private and anonymous, which appears to be a very important part of the artwork. The system did not reveal phone numbers to Takala and her team. At the heart of the work lies the idea to find a solution to the problem of loneliness rather than exploiting people's desperation and their most vulnerable moments as a medium for an artwork. While Invisible Friend might offer a temporary feeling of intimacy and friendship, it also inhibits personal human interaction. We seem to expect more from technology and less from each other, not only in relation to problem solving and increased efficiency, but also when it comes to intimacy, relationships, and the feeling of being connected, supported, wanted, and valued.
Where Takala's exhibition succeeded in engagement, interaction and participation, Phil Collins' work in his 2015 exhibition, How to Make a Refugee, came under great scrutiny. The project followed a camera crew set up by journalists on a photo shoot with a Kosovan Albanian refugee family in Macedonia. The aim of the piece was to address the depiction of war victims by journalists and the conventions of representation of suffering in the media. However, the project rose questions of participation. According to Neve Kelly, Phil Collins picked up his camera and pointed it at a family who in this moment of filming had also become someone else's chosen subjects. It was the media team who constructed the image of the refugees. The photo shoot was set up by how the journalists wanted. Although Collins was outspoken about the aims of this project, the participatory factor of the refugees in regards to their circumstances and social status was questionable. Were they actively participating, or were they just the subject? Sherry Arnstein's ladder of citizen participation highlights the structure of what each level of participation entails. At the very bottom of the ladder, manipulation equals non-participation. It is arguable that by following the media team on this photo shoot, the subject did not belong to Collins, and the manipulative nature of how the shoot was set up and the refugees partaking was contrived to substitute for genuine participation. Participation is key in cultural democracy. It is the reason government organisations such as the Arts Council were set up. However, participatory discourse rapidly became part of the official aims and objectives of governments and international development agencies. It is argued that diversity becomes a tick box. This is discursive to the change that these organisations call for. Not only is it regressive, but it reinforces social division, highlighting Gramsci's hegemony based on class domination.
Cultural democracy and participation is affected by education and social class. It has been argued by many theorists that the higher classes have control over the lower classes, enabling them to dictate which cultural activities and interests are available to which people. In turn, this affects who can participate in what cultural interests, and suggests that cultural democracy is not achievable while social classes are apparent. Cultural and creative industries have been developed by the bourgeois to create class division. For example, academic subjects such as English, maths or science are known to be where you are more likely to succeed. In the lower creative topics such as art or fashion are where you are labelled as an underachiever. Popular theorist Bourdieu didn't consider himself a Marxist, but was heavily influenced by Karl Marx, who said that culture served to legitimise the ruling class while repressing the working class. Marx also argued that economic activity produced culture, not the other way around. Bourdieu argued that capital acted as a foundation for social life and class. According to Bourdieu, cultural capital comes in three forms: embodied, such as your accent; objectified, such as a fancy car or branded clothes; and institutionalised, such as qualifications or titles. In addition to this, his very famous concept known as habitus argues that your social upbringing and environment affect your skills and interests in later life. A good example of this is in the Hunger Games. District 1 and 2 are trained to kill and given lots of food in preparation for the games, as they are the most privileged districts. Whereas District 12, where Katniss comes from, they're brought up in a run-down environment where they have to fight for food and survival on a daily basis, ultimately contributing to her winning the games. Similar to this is Antonio Gramsci and his theory of cultural hegemony. Interestingly, he argues that governments and the bourgeois had developed to use social ideology rather than physical force to keep the working class oppressed. He argued that values were created for the classes that became common sense to them, and they felt comfortable within their class. The bourgeois are able to control the state and keep everyone in their place. He also argues that if the lower classes were to rise up and create a revolution, there may be a world without class. Although personally I think there is always going to be social class. As humans we are competitive and greedy, and there is no way that upper classes will be willing to not use money as a form of power. For example, the French Revolution, there was a force from below, and even though they did achieve some things that they wanted, not everyone was happy. Another theorist, Paulo Freire, states that the working class stay oppressed rather than fighting for liberty. This is due to social factors such as chosen syllabuses for education and the opportunities given to each class. Freire was personally affected with a poor upbringing without enough food or education. A quote from Freire himself: "I didn't understand anything because of my hunger. I wasn't dumb, it wasn't a lack of interest, my social condition didn't allow me to have an education. Experience showed me once again the relationship between social class and knowledge."
The last night of the proms. Following 2017's prom finale, The Guardian's Ajita Chakraborty launched a stinging attack on the ideology and the audience. A postcard from a country that never existed. He laid bare the received wisdom on the traditional aspects of the event. The sea songs, Land of Hope and Glory, and Jerusalem and Rule Britannia were only strung together for the first time in 1954, smack bang in the period between the loss of India and the fiasco of Suez. His overarching concern is that although this is superficially harmless, there is a deeper issue about self-delusion in 2017 around our nation's place in the world, and more critically, a collective wish that the rest of the world might also see it that way. He sums up the audience as people who find telethons entertaining and miss Dave Lee Travis from the Radio 1 schedules. Such folk deserve their expensive entertainment, but why should it be taken as part of the shorthand for contemporary Britain is beyond me. The question raised about expensive entertainment underlines the undertone of the piece, which questions whether participation in this entertainment is a triumph of democratic participation, or an exclusive club for the terminally tasteless who maybe glean a sense of superiority by dint of their participation. Meanwhile, over in the Telegraph, Adam Sammet. It is perfectly possible to enjoy the last night in all its jingoistic silliness as both a cultural Europhile and a patriotic Briton. Moreover, as Sir Andras emphasised, classical music should be an integral part of our lives, which requires our unmitigated attention. The exploitation of the proms as a publicity platform drives a wedge between audiences and the music. And more importantly, perhaps each other. Needless to say, the majority of protesters will have had little experience of either the proms or the last night. Perhaps when Barenboim spoke of education, he would have done better to reprimand the slaves of social media who seek to politicise everything within their grasp. The often criticised aspect of the second half is dismissed as benign silliness, and it is the Telegraph that raises the diversity of London as being on show at the proms rather than the Guardian. The plethora of flags is encyclopedic, it claims. Despite this call to depoliticise the last night, Michael Henderson in the Telegraph following this year's event asks, why Remain fanatics just don't get it? The agenda is clear immediately and seeks to be divisively political given the use of the word fanatic. His emphasis is on the globalised nature of the event and how accessible it is now, a true expression of an outward-looking and open Britain. This is the very event where Daniel Barenboim, to the horror of the Europhobic Tory right, launched a stinging rebuke over Brexit. Isolationist tendencies and nationalism in its very narrow sense is something that is very dangerous. The Sun went on to report that he hinted that Brits voted to leave the EU because of a lack of knowledge, saying the main problem of today is there is not enough education. So, here's the question. The proms, a triumph of outward-looking and inclusive participation, or jingoistic delusion and nation-building for the few? What do you reckon, Benji boy?
An expressive cultural democracy. It talks about how technology has changed cultural democracies, that this can connect us to different audiences that may not be accounted for, as they are not in the theatres or venues. If our cultural policies and institutions do not facilitate expression by enabling us to participate in shaping and personalising the culture of which we are a part of, then they miss the point. Rather than simply communicating our culture and our heritage, our cultural and creative policies and institutions should help us to make use of them and create new values for the present and future. We may lose some cultural democrat through not enabling ourselves to personalise the culture in which we are a part of. This could damage the idea of democracies within the future as we do not allow ourselves to be and create new cultural policies and values. We should re-establish the meanings and values of art and culture in everyday life and restore meaning of cultural democracies to society. There should be a call for change in the way we understand and practice cultural policies, and advocacy is closely linked to the technological development, meaning we should consider how many people are looking at culture and art forms from a distance, and how we are all using technology in our everyday lives. It is an interconnected, peer-driven, participatory culture, which voluntary and pleasurable. The authentic experience is a valuable point within democracy. The concept of expressive cultural democracy undefines different concepts of culture and not only acknowledges but further stimulates an integrated use and understanding of high and popular culture. An expressive cultural democracy acknowledges both body and mind as a vehicle for authentic experiences. Means we should be using all of us as people to engage and to be engaged with art and culture.